All right, let's dive straight into today's explainer. We're looking at a deeply serious, absolutely fascinating legal case out of Mongolia. We're going to break down the anatomy of a court verdict following a tragic industrial accident on a construction site. Specifically, we're zeroing in on the direct legal responsibility of an occupational health and safety officer. It's a really compelling look at exactly how the justice system measures the ultimate cost of workplace negligence. So we start with the number 7. On September 20th, 2024, a worker, identified in the court docs simply as J, suffered a fatal fall from the 7th floor of a construction project in the Khan-Ul district. That single number, 7, represents the human element right at the dead center of this whole legal journey. It's a stark, heartbreaking reminder of just how fast things go wrong when safety protocols fail. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the 7th floor tragedy itself. Second, the legal responsibility involved. Third, we'll look at the compensation. And finally, the court's verdict. Okay, Section 1, the 7th floor tragedy. Now, the legal machinery kicked into gear almost immediately after that September 20th accident. Through October and November of 2024, multiple specialized agencies ran deep forensic investigations. And they didn't just do medical autopsies, right? They brought in specialized workplace safety experts to figure out exactly what broke down on that site. It actually took until April 13th, 2026, for the first instance court of criminal and civil cases to hand down its final ruling. That nearly 2-year timeline really highlights just how meticulous these workplace fatality investigations are. Moving on to Section 2, the OHS officer's legal responsibility. This is where it gets really specific. In a lot of industrial accidents, you might expect the company itself or, the top executives to be the ones on trial. But here, the focus is squarely on the occupational health and safety officer. The court laid out the exact duties this officer totally failed to perform. The investigation showed they didn't conduct proper site inspections, they didn't eliminate obvious workplace hazards, and they completely dropped the ball on organizing safety training for the workers. So, in the eyes of the court, this wasn't just someone doing a bad job. It was a lethal omission of duty. And here's the absolute crucial point you need to take away. Workplace safety rules are not just bureaucratic paperwork. They are binding legal obligations. Under Article 27.3.3 of the Occupational Health and Safety Law, an officer doesn't just have some loose guidelines. They have a strict legal mandate to conduct inspections and literally take immediate action to fix any violations they spot. The second they sign that employment contract, they are taking on absolute legal liability for the safety of that site. Because of those failures, the officer was hit with a severe charge under Criminal Code Article 10.6.1, negligent homicide due to failure to fulfill duties. Now, the law does distinguish this from intentional harm. It's classified under negligence, but the gravity here is just immense. By basically blowing off their administrative and legal duties, the officer's inaction directly led to a person losing their life. That brings us to Section 3, compensation of damages. So how did the defendant respond? Well, they utilized something called the simplified procedure. This is a legal framework used when a defendant actively admits fault and tries to make amends. The officer fully confessed to their guilt, no dispute. But, a confession isn't enough on its own. The law dictates that the defendant must also fully compensate the victim's family. Once those two massive conditions are met, the prosecution and the defendant can actually agree on a proposed penalty to pitch to the judge, which really streamlines the whole judicial process. In terms of actual compensation, the court noted the defendant provided pretty substantial restitution. They transferred a 49-square-meter, 2-room apartment in the Khan-Ul district directly over to the deceased's family. Because of this significant action to, provide for the family left behind, the victim's legal representatives submitted a formal written statement. They told the court they had received the compensation, had zero further complaints, and wouldn't be making any future claims. And honestly, that step was an absolute game changer for the trajectory of the sentencing. Which leads us to our final section, Section 4, the court decision and suspended sentence. Think about the incredibly delicate balance the judge had to strike here. On one hand, you have a severe failure of duty that ended a human life. It's a tragedy that you literally cannot undo. But on the flip side, the court had to acknowledge that this was a first-time offense for the safety officer. The negligence wasn't malicious or intentional, and the officer showed genuine remorse. They voluntarily went through the simplified procedure and made sure the victim's family was financially secured with a new home. So what did the judge decide? Ultimately, the court handed down a 2-year suspended sentence. What that means is the officer avoids actual prison time but stays under strict legal supervision. The judge applied specific provisions of the criminal code that allow for some leniency when damages are fully repaired. But make no mistake, this is absolutely not an acquittal. That conviction stays permanently on their record. And the judge made it crystal clear, if the officer fails to follow the strict supervisory rules, that suspension gets revoked immediately. For the next 2 years, the defendant is under a microscope. They are legally obligated to report any change in where they live or where they work. If they break those terms or commit any intentional crime during this period, poof, the leniency is gone and they are going straight to prison to serve that time. I want to leave you with a final thought on the true human cost of ignoring these regulations. This entire case, from that heartbreaking fall on the 7th floor all the way to the gavel coming down, proves that occupational health and safety is never, ever just a checkbox exercise. When we treat safety standards like annoying paperwork, the consequences are incredibly real, they are legally severe, and they are humanly devastating. The ultimate goal of these laws isn't to punish people after the fact. It's to make sure that absolutely everyone makes it home at the end of their shift.